Chapter 9. Cora pulled her suitcase behind her as she walked through the hotel lobby. Even this early on Christmas morning, people milled in the lobby, coming, going, sitting, talking. She maneuvered her way through a crowd near a complimentary coffee service and headed toward the exit. She wore a white sundress with wide shoulder straps, a red belt, and red flaps. She headed from here to the Keys and knew the temperature would reach 80 degrees today. To combat the air conditioning in the plane, she had a red sweater draped over her arm. When she saw Davis come out of the revolving door, her heart skipped an excited beat, and she raised her hand. They did not have plans to meet this morning, since she had such an early flight, and they had a rather late night, but the sight of him filled her with such joy. He strolled through the crowd toward her, smiling, carrying 2 paper coffee cups from her favorite coffee place. "Merry Christmas," he said, holding out a cup. "Peppermint mocha with whipped cream." "Not pumpkin?" Davis shook his head. "Pumpkin's played out." She put her nose near the little opening in the lid and inhaled, breathing in the scent of coffee mixed with peppermint, chocolate, and rich cream. "Oh, you are totally my favorite now." He took her suitcase from her and said, "Was I ever not?" She laughed. "I can't remember back that far." He leaned forward and ran his lips over her cheek. "I came to take you to the airport on my way back to training." She took a sip of her coffee and closed her eyes, loving the flavor on her tongue. "Thank you for this." Smiling, she hooked her free arm into his. "And I'm especially thankful for your company. I'm going to miss you." "Hey!" Cora heard the man yell, but didn't even think for a moment that he was yelling at them. They walked another couple steps when he yelled out again. "Hey, Elliot, I'm talking to you." Davis's arm muscles tightened under her hand, and he stopped walking. She glanced at his face and saw his cheeks flush bright red as his eyes hardened and narrowed into slits. When she looked at the man yelling, she gasped, recognizing Stan Denny. "That wasn't your slot on the team. Only Americans should be allowed to play." Davis handed Cora his cup of coffee and stepped in between her and Stan. "Stan, I told you before, I don't have any problems with you. And right now, I'm telling you to back off. If you want to go, I'm up for it. On the ice." Around them, the busy lobby quieted as people stopped to stare at the disturbance. From near the door, Cora saw 2 uniformed bellhops head their way. One of them spoke into a radio. Stan stepped forward, coming toe-to-toe with Davis. He looked over at Cora. "What are you doing with this Korean boy anyway, Jade? No American boy wants you because you're a squaw?" Cora felt frozen in fear. What was the right thing to do? Engage him or ignore? When he called her a name and put his finger in her face, she took a step backward. "You hear me, Redskin? I asked you a question." Davis stepped completely between them and put a hand on his chest. "Last warning. Just walk away. I'm not bluffing." "Neither am I, Kimchi." Without warning, Stan took both fists and punched Davis square in the chest. Davis staggered backward, knocking into Cora, spilling both cups of coffee down the front of her white dress and making her lose her footing. She gasped and leaned forward, trying to regain her balance while also trying to keep the hot liquid from touching too much of her skin. Tears burned her eyes, and she looked up as uniformed security made their way through the crowd. With a roar, Davis grabbed Stan's right shoulder with his left hand and punched Stan in the left side of his face with a closed right fist. Stunned, Stan grabbed the front of Davis's shirt and swung, but Davis brought his fist down hard on the hand holding his shirt. Fabric ripped. The momentum brought Stan closer, close enough that Davis crouched slightly, then sprang upward, using the momentum of his powerful legs to drive an uppercut punch square into Stan's chin. Stan began to fall backward. Davis kept his grip on the man's right shoulder as he fell to the alabaster floor. Davis didn't stop. He knelt over the man, straddling him, lifting him into his punches with his left hand and slamming his right fist into the man's hateful face 3 more times before the bellman pulled him off. He had opened a wound on Stan's forehead and broken his nose. When he let him go, Stan fell against the quartz tile floor, his head making a thudding sound like a dropped melon, and blood splattered all over the tile floor. Davis struggled against the bellman's restraint on his upper arms, his face a mask of focused rage, and Cora stepped in front of him. "Davis!" He struggled some more, and she put a hand on his shoulder. "Davis!" When he looked at her, she watched his eyes clear and his face relax from the furious scowl. He looked her up and down. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She gestured at her dress. "I'm fine, just a little stained." He lowered his fists and blood dripped from his right knuckles. None of it was his blood. He relaxed and looked at the man on his left. "I'm cool. Sorry, guys. It's good." Both of them released him as Tampa police came through the hotel door. A hotel security officer brought them to where they all stood. Stan sat in a nearby chair. He held his head cocked backward at an awkward angle and pinched the bridge of his nose with a finger and thumb. It wasn't doing a lot to stem the blood flowing from his mouth and nose. Two bellmen stood guard over him. Witnesses talked over each other as they tried to defend Davis's actions to the police. As the policemen calmed everyone down and separated witnesses, Cora and Davis sat on a couch together well across the lobby from Stan. Davis sat with his elbows on his knees and his head bowed, lacing his fingers behind his head. She could see the bruising on his knuckles. He hadn't spoken to her since asking if she was okay. She put a hand on his arm, but he jerked away from her and surged to his feet. A security officer stood near them, and at Davis's gesture he walked up to him. "Miss Anderson has a flight in an hour. Is there some way to let her change clothes and have someone get her to the airport?" Cora jumped up, a rush of emotion making her talk very fast. "I don't need to leave." Davis whirled around. She could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Yes, you do. Go home, Cora." "I won't." She looked at the guard. "I would love to go change, though. This soggy dress is starting to damage my calm." "Of course, Miss Anderson. Do you want a room?" "That would be great." As she extended the handle of her suitcase, a desk clerk approached carrying a phone. Cora closed her eyes and said a quick prayer for patience as the woman approached her. From the look of nervous fear on the woman's face, she could easily guess what words would come out of her mouth. "Miss Anderson, Mr. Viscoli's on the phone for you." She smiled, a tight-lipped smile. Anger flooded her mind and taking restraint away from her tongue. "Well, of course he is, because he heard about this by accident, didn't he?" Snatching the phone from her hands, she turned toward Davis and saw him scowling at her. "Hi, Uncle Tony." "Cora, what happened?" "Remember that guy who posted all the racist stuff this summer about Davis and me? He was waiting in the lobby this morning." "He was in my hotel? That's interesting." "He attacked us. He punched Davis and shoved him into me, and Davis defended me." There was a slight pause. "Very good. Will you be flying to the Keys today?" "I don't think so. I think maybe in a few days." "I understand. I'm sure your parents will be in touch. You will be missed at Christmas dinner. The staff at the hotel will see to any of your needs. You can call me or your Aunt Robin if you need anything at all. Cora, I love you." "I love you too." Davis raised an eyebrow and stared at her. Unwilling to be bullied, she lifted her chin. "I am going to check back in and change clothes. Would you like to come to my room with me?" "No, Cora. Of course not. When have I ever? Just no." He turned his back on her and she realized that his blood was up. She didn't know what to do other than give him space. "Great. I'll be back here after a while." She turned to the desk clerk. "I'll take the keys back to my suite, please." "Right away, ma'am." Davis stood against the wall of the lobby and kept his hands fisted in his pockets of his jeans. He couldn't believe that he'd lost his temper so easily. It had taken two grown men to pull him off of Stan Denny, and if they hadn't, he knew that he would have killed him. He would have punched him with his fists until the man died. He knew he'd done it under the umbrella of protecting Cora, but that didn't excuse the red-hot rage that had flooded him and forced all cognitive thinking away. The phone in his pocket vibrated, and he pulled it out, seeing a call coming in from his coach. "Coach," he said as a greeting. "Bad day, Mr. Elliott?" "You could say that, Coach." "I just did. Let's see if I can make it any better. Police have cleared you of any wrongdoing. We'll see you back here this evening. 5 o'clock roll call." He released a pent-up breath as the worry that he'd just punched his Olympic chances away fled him. His limbs felt weak. "I'll be there." "Merry Christmas, Davis." The line went dead. He hung the phone up and leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closed. He thought he'd learned how to temper that explosion. He thought he could channel all of his rage through his hockey stick and remove it entirely from his day-to-day life. When Stan punched him, then pushed him into Cora, his entire world started to move in slow motion. He'd seen the fear cross her face, watched the arc of the coffee as it sloshed out of the cups, watched her nearly fall to the tile floor, and saw the look of smug satisfaction settle on Stan's face. His response had less to do with protecting Cora, and more to do with wanting to wipe that look clean off the other man's face. He'd admit that. Yes, he was protecting Cora. But he was also reacting Reacting was never ever good. He was supposed to harness his anger. He was never supposed to let it harness him. The elevator door opened and Cora walked out, now wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt with her Volleyballs Association logo screen printed on the front. When she saw him, she stopped moving for a fraction of a second, then approached him. "Everything's resolved?" He pursed his lips. "Seems that way. Police cleared me, arrested Stan Denny, and contacted my coach, who called and said I'm still on the team." He gestured toward the hotel exit. "Reporters are everywhere. There are 2 videos of the altercation that have gone viral in the last 10 minutes or so." Cora held up a room key. "The entire top floor of this hotel can be converted into a suite of rooms. There are connecting doors, sliding doors, and partitions. A lot of stars that travel with entourages rented. Here's a key for the first door. It's 4 doors from the one that I used to enter my room. I also have all connecting rooms and have opened them up." She spoke with authority, matter-of-factly, and didn't wait for him to respond when she walked over to the elevator. "I'll see you up there, and our reputations can remain intact." When the doors slid shut behind her, he laughed. She certainly knew how to take care of matters of impression versus reality. 5 minutes later, he followed her up and used the keycard to access his room. He walked into a living room with a big marble fireplace and white leather furniture. The open curtains exposed a view of the downtown and the bay in the distance. A door across from the fireplace stood open, and he walked through that into a billiard room with a big marble bar and kitchen area. Another door at the end of that room stood open, so he crossed the expanse of Spanish tile floor and into Cora's suite. She stood next to the window, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She looked at him and immediately asked, "Why did you ask me to leave?" He had anticipated that as her first question, and knew he would answer honestly. "Because I need to process this morning, and I'll process it better if I'm alone." "Then go be alone. That doesn't mean I can't be here for when you're done processing." She set the cup on a nearby table and crossed her arms over her chest. "I realize that men and women are different, but if I had to process something, I'd want you available to me." He relived the incident, feeling his fist come in contact with Stan Denny's face, so he shoved his hands into his pockets. "You should be processing, Cora. You should process what you saw today." "And what was that?" He let out a huff of breath. "That would be me losing control and wanting to kill that man. And you know what? I would have done it." "Davis!" "No!" He walked through the room so he could stand next to her. "He went down with the first punch, Cora. Aside from the fact that what I should have done was push him against a wall and physically restrain him until security could get there, I punched him. I'm in the best shape I will ever be, and I intentionally punched him as hard as I could. And once he went down, I followed him. That's not normal behavior. That's not a controlled person." He put his hands behind his neck and spun away from her. "That's not a person filled with the Holy Spirit, using the patience, love, or self-control imbued by Him. It's me, turning all of that aside and trying to destroy a man's face." He turned back around and he could see the tears sliding down her cheeks. She started toward him, but he held a hand up. "No." Even he could see the tremble in his hand. "Just leave me alone. I'll be here. Stay or go. Just leave me alone." "What happened?" He cut her off. "What happened has happened before. Who's to say it won't happen again? Maybe one day you'll push the right button and I lose it, huh? Does that not occur to you?" The look of confusion on her face was almost comical. "I seriously think you're overthinking that." He fisted his hand and brought it up to his forehead, closing his eyes and praying for some emotional balance. "Cora, I can't process this with you near me. I have to be back at the barracks at 5 anyway. And this conversation isn't helping anything. I'm leaving. Goodbye." Cora continued forward. "Davis, stop!" He stopped and felt her hand touch the back of his shoulder. With his eyes closed, he listened to her. "I love you, Davis." Her breath hitched on his name. His chest clenched at her words. As much as he had longed to hear them before, now they were exactly the last thing he needed. "You shouldn't." He never turned around as he walked back through the rooms, closing doors behind him as he went. For a moment, back in the room for which he had a key, he contemplated staying. But he didn't want to. He wanted to get back to the barracks so he could get his head back in the game. He stormed across the room and put his hand on the door handle. For a moment, he paused and looked over at the closed doors of the suite. Finally, he shook his head and walked out of the room, leaving the key on the coffee table. When he got down to the lobby, he walked over to the concierge's desk. The man looked up and smiled. "How may I help you, Mr. Elliot?" "Can you get me out of here away from the reporters? I need a cab." "No, sir, but the hotel has a town car for use by our special guests, and it has dark Florida-tinted windows. We have a special exit as well, if you'll just follow me."